All right. Well, we have heard from just 4 speakers so far. We have 7 to go, so we will keep going here. But we've heard about the social and the neurological and the legal and the political and the economic and the medical and the emotional impact of these issues. So maybe take it down a notch, perhaps, and talk about the technological aspect of these issues. So Ian Corby is the Executive Director of the Age Verification Providers Association. And maybe we can take a little emotional break and hear kind of technically how age verification might work. Ian, thanks.
I'm Ian Corby. I'm the Executive Director of the Age Verification Providers Association, and we're a global trade body representing 30 suppliers of online age checking solutions. And our mission is to make the internet age aware. That's age aware, not identity aware. When you walk into a bar, the bartender doesn't need to know your name, he just needs to know you're over 21. We've heard some impactful testimony here today, and I think I'm here to tell you, as legislators, it's really not hard to solve this. I'm not going to try and pretend that I represent an industry that has, leading edge technology. It's actually pretty straightforward to prove your age online without disclosing your identity. And frankly, if we can put a man on the moon, we can do that. So what our industry does is allow us to apply the same norms of society in the real world to the online world. So we wouldn't expect to let our kids go downtown here in Trenton and walk into a strip club or a casino or a bar without being checked for their age, and that's what we ought to do online, particularly as we spend more and more of our time in the metaverse. Last year was actually the 100th anniversary of age verification. So in 1923, Nancy Astor equalised age requirements for alcohol in the UK, but we're seeing lots of countries around the world requiring this. In the UK, we had the Digital Economy Act. A chap called Boris Johnson got cold feet about that, but they brought it back now with the Online Safety Act, which comes in next year. Australia's about to start a trial of age verification technologies, and Europe's brought in the Digital Services Act. We even have a bill in Texas that the Fifth Circuit recently upheld, although we'll be looking forward to a Supreme Court review of that, which I hope we will win. So we were founded in 2018 as an industry anticipating that UK law, and the porn sites themselves realised that people weren't going to be comfortable handing over their ID to a porn site, so they effectively encouraged a new industry, these independent third parties to check your age. And I thought it might be helpful just to take you through how they do that. But the key thing is that my members check your age, and then they throw away all the information about you. They don't need to keep any personal data. They just need to know that this user has been tested in the past, and we know they're over 18. And then when this user goes to any adult site, the adult site says to my member, hey, we've got one of these users who's signed up with you. Can you confirm they're over 18? And we just send a yes or a no. No information, no name, no date of birth, just yes or no. So let's talk about how we can do that. The sort of traditional measures, I don't know if you remember when you bought alcohol, you might have had to hold up your ID and take a snap. Well, now we can do that, obviously, with a camera on the phone. Actually, we can read all the details on your phone, calculate your age on the phone, and send that yes or no to the age verification provider without any of this information leaving the phone. So that is privacy preserving. But more recently, we've got age estimation technology. So you take a selfie, and using AI, we can estimate your age within about 1.5 years of your real age. Now, that's not necessarily going to work if it's your 18th birthday and you're trying to go online on that day. But if you're as old as me, we can be extremely confident that that technology has proven my age. So say that might deal with everybody over 23 or 25. They can just take that selfie. Again, that process can happen entirely on the device. If you're not comfortable using your face, this is a really innovative area. And just in the last month or so, we've got a new member, and they allow you to hold up, make 3 signals with your hand, and based on how you move your hand, they've calculated that they can estimate your age with enormous accuracy as well. We can also use your voice, or if you're willing to share your email address. Based on where you've used your email address, not many 5-year-olds have been searching for a better interest rate on their mortgage using their email address. So using points of data like that, again, great way to estimate your age. So we have all these different methods. So we can confirm, of course, that this is accurate because we have international standards that we've written with the British standards, the IEEE, which is a US standards body, and the International Standards Organization is finalising one at the moment. And you can be independently audited as a provider against that. so we can check that you are accurate. Now, I wouldn't claim we're 100% perfect, but the aim of the game here is to stop most kids seeing most porn most of the time. So if you set a bar as legislators of, say, 99%, we want this to work 99% of the time, that's perfectly possible to achieve, but it's also realistic. And it doesn't, we could achieve 100%, but it'd be like super inconvenient for everybody. You'd be having to check on the hour every hour, which incidentally is what the French regulators just asked people to do because they're being really tough, but I wouldn't recommend that. Cost is no excuse either. When I first started a business about 5 years ago, it was costing maybe $1 a go. The UK government has formally estimated it to be 12 cents now per check. A site will probably do that check once a year when you open an account. It might be a good idea to check it every year to make sure the same person is in control of that account. But it's 12 cents in the adult industry, which is making a considerable amount of money. I mentioned before about data security, that we don't keep your data. The only non-hackable database is no database at all, so we just don't keep that data. There is, of course, a small window where you might be sharing your data. We use the same sort of security that banks or healthcare providers would use, so there is a risk in that small moment when we're checking it. But there isn't some big database full of people's personal details, and there absolutely isn't a list of all the websites that you visited, because that would be so attractive to hackers that you'd be under attack all the time. It's a really effective piece of legislation. You may be told, oh, kids will use virtual private networks. Well, I've had a look at Assemblyman Weather's piece of legislation. I haven't seen the bit in there that says you must not allow children in New Jersey to access pornography unless they're smart and use a virtual private network, in which case it's okay. The law is the law, right? So the websites have to protect all kids, no matter what measure they use to get themselves onto the internet. The only area I might suggest you could do a bit more thinking is around enforceability. A lot of these websites are based overseas. What they've done in the UK is take powers to require payment services provider like Visa and MasterCard to withdraw services from non-compliant sites. But I would say in the previous iteration of our legislation in the UK, they didn't do that, but Visa and MasterCard offered to do it voluntarily anyway in order to help implement these bills. They do not want to be associated with illegal websites, so they will refuse to take payments. And that's been extended to hosting services and advertising services, all the things that make the commercial side of that industry work. So it's perfectly possible to reach well beyond the borders of New Jersey. I won't go into the details around the difference between the different methods. Device-based solutions do have a place, filtering has a place, parental controls have a place, and teaching kids to be resilient has a place. But if you really want to stop this at source, then you need to put the responsibility on the people who are publishing it, because they know where it is and they know who their users are. I'm more than happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions, comments for Ian? I suspect that our follow-up with you will be after this and more technical as we look at my bill. If you have a suggestion on beefing up the enforceability, for example, please share it. We'll talk about that. I guess just conceptually, so for everybody kind of thinking about this and watching this, that the idea is that a consumer goes to an adult content site. We have legislation in place that requires the adult content site to go to one of your members, a third-party provider, who will say the consumer is or is not eligible to consume the data on your platform. Is that right?
Yes. And one thing I didn't mention was we're working as an industry to make reusable, interoperable checks, so that having done a check to access one site, you can accept a token on your device, which is a little bit towards the device-based solution, but it's a temporary token, which will allow you for a period of time to access other sites without having to repeat that process. Obviously, how long that period of time could be set by the Attorney General.
And the site, the check is instantaneous? How long would the check take?
Oh, like that facial age estimation might take a couple of seconds. You may be taking 30 seconds if you've got to pull out some ID and take a photo and a selfie to check against that. But it's not a long and complicated process. And as I said, it's just when you're first signing up to these sites. And
you leave it to the adult content provider to choose the verification method that would be compliant with the law, correct?
Yes, typically they will refer you to the providers they've contracted with. Our interoperability solution means that if you've already done a check in the last few months, then you won't have to repeat that process.
Is there a way for consumers who think they've been misidentified to protest in a way to say, hey, actually I am eligible to view these sites?
So we were born in Europe where the general data protection regulations require you to be able to appeal any data that's held on you that is incorrect. Most people would have some ID, so if you fail a face estimation, for example, you then resort to ID. But if you don't have ID, then you may need like a backup process. So we have a vouching process where you could go to a teacher or a healthcare worker and they could go online and vouch for your age as a last resort. And again, the regulations when they're implementing the law could stipulate that that's a requirement, that the platforms have to make sure that everybody can prove their age one way or another, no matter how expensive that might be.
Anybody else? Yeah.
Quick question. And what other industries are using this technology to verify age? I'm assuming, assume alcohol, like shipping alcohol from state to state or something. Can you give us any examples if you know?
Yes. So as I said, we sort of stood ourselves up in 2018 expecting it to be for pornography. That didn't happen. So there was a pivot to alcohol, to vaping products, to online gambling in particular, which of course is taking off around the world, and the US is now catching up. Gambling is another really interesting one because it's state by state, so you've got to be really sure that somebody's in the correct state before they're allowed to gamble. Hence, we have really good ways of telling where you are, which is very relevant for this VPN question where people pretend to be somewhere that they're not. So it's being used quite often for that. I would say, obviously, those other use cases, anonymity is not as important. If you're ordering something online, you kind of have to tell them who you are and where you live, otherwise it's never going to arrive. But we started by building anonymity. And anonymity has become really important for children's data. So you have COPPA, Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. You may have the Kids Online Safety Act relatively soon as well. Again, where we're needing to know about the age of kids as to whether they can share their data without verifiable parental consent. So anonymity is also important when dealing with kids' data for age verification purposes.
And I'm assuming, you think of the 15-year-old boy that gains access to dad's account. How do we?
Yeah, so I mean, shared devices, borrowed devices. So the family tablet, for example, we do still have to rely on dad to log out in the same way as we have to rely dad not to leave his copy of an adult magazine on the coffee table. There's only so much we can do inside the household. We can, however, prompt for what we call re-authentication. So double checking you are still the same person who did the age check. Now, how often you do that is a discretionary matter for a regulator. You might want to just check every 2 weeks that the person who's using that account is still the same person who did the age check, which might be a PIN number, a password, or if you want to be really strict, a biometric check with check the image is the same one you saw before, where you've kept some sort of hashed record of what that image looks like. So there are ways and means. It's a balance between convenience and accuracy, and you obviously want to get that right because people might rebel against it if you make it too strict.
And you are permitted to laugh at this question, but I want to ask it. Are there any adult content providing companies to date that are participating in this without any government intervention or requirement?
Without government intervention, yes, there was one. The Playboy organisation did experiment with it some years ago when we were setting this up. They wanted to be seen as a leading provider. It has been implemented in France and Germany, where the top 5 or so sites implemented it. They then decided they didn't like it and went to court, and there have been very lengthy legal battles in court. I think that's more about having a level playing field. So what doesn't work is if you just target a few providers and they feel that they're going to be sort of sought out separately and everyone's going to defect to smaller sites which aren't as well regulated. Your regulator needs to say to everybody on day one, you all have to comply and you are all at risk of action if you don't comply.
Thank you.
Ian, thank you. I'm sure we'll be following up.